I'm Kim, and welcome to the Scratch Me Life Kitchen. Today, we're going to learn how to make Monterey Jack cheese. Now, Monterey Jack is actually one of the few true American cheeses. It originated by the Mexican Franciscan friars in Monterey, California in about the 17th century. If you're not super familiar with Jack, it's a semi-firm, kind of mild flavored cheese that you don't have to age very long. As a matter of fact, you can make it and after 2 weeks you can taste it. So that's one of the ones we like because we're used to instant gratification. It was commercially offered by a gentleman by the name of David Jack. So it was made in Monterey, marketed by this guy named Jack, and then we have the name Monterey Jack. So there you go. There's your trivia lesson. So you're ready for Jeopardy now. So let's get on to making the cheese. Like with every other cheese, your very first step you're going to do is heat your milk. Now there's a video on here on what kind of milk to use, so you can watch that for some more details if you're not familiar. One thing I'm going to tell you is never use ultra pasteurized milk. It will not work for making cheese. Okay, I like to use raw milk. I'm really lucky in that I have a source, Valley Milk Simply bottled out of Modesto. It's really hard to find and it's not even legal in all states. It's not legal in all countries, but it is absolutely the best milk to use. So I heated my milk to 86 degrees. That's the very first step, no matter what kind of cheese you're making. And the next thing I need to do is I need to add a culture. And what the culture does is it helps to make the good bacteria that makes the flavors in our cheese kind of bloom, kind of ripen. That's why the stage after we add the culture is called the ripening stage. And for this one, we're going to use mesophilic culture. Now, there's two main types of cultures. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cultures, but there's two main cultures. There's mesophilic culture, which we're going to use today, and there's thermophilic culture. Mesophilic culture is used in cheeses where you're going to heat the milk to less than 90 degrees. So we're going to heat this to 86. So we're going to use mesoculture. What we're going to do is we're going to use our little itty bitty spoons right here. These are really important to have in cheese making. They're about $6 online. It's 1/64 to 1/4. And yes, you will use every one of those sizes in cheese making. And what you want to do, and I already did this, but I'm going to show you, is you are going to get a level measurement. So for a 1 gallon batch, you're going to use a level 1/4 teaspoon. And then you're just going to kind of tap the teaspoon and move it around like that. The reason we do it that way instead of just dumping it in there is, first of all, it's dehydrated and we need it to rehydrate to work really well. And secondly, we want to get it as evenly distributed throughout the milk as possible. So after you do that, you're going to put your lid on your pot. Now this is a stainless steel pot with a reinforced bottom, and those are absolutely the best kind of pots to use for cheese making. Stainless steel is wonderful in the kitchen because it's not porous, so it can't grab that bacteria and hold on to it and hide it from you. Because no matter how hard you clean your pots and pans, if it's porous material, things are getting in there that you can't clean out. Now we're letting it rehydrate, and the reason we're doing that, like I said, is it's dehydrated. And for it to be effective, it has to rehydrate. Now after it rehydrates, we're going to stir it into the milk. Now we stir differently in cheese making than we do with regular cheeses, or with regular stirring. You know, you're used to doing this. And we have a slotted spoon so that the milk and the ingredients will go in through this spoon, and again, help with the even distribution. So we're going to stir up and down. We're going to go from the top to the bottom, and you're going to go round and round. Round and round and round. You're going to do this about 15 to 20 times. And again, let's just make sure you get that culture in there really well. And then you're going to put your top back on it and maintain the temperature at 86 degrees for 45 minutes. You're like, how do I do that? This is one of the questions that I had when I first started making cheese. Well, milk holds its temperature really well. And if you heat it up in a stainless steel pot, especially one with a reinforced bottom, and you put the lid on it, I guarantee you, no matter how cold your kitchen is, it is not going to drop anything in the 45 minutes. Maybe a degree or two if your kitchen's like 50 degrees or something, but it's going to maintain its temperature because milk maintains its temperature very, very well, especially in a stainless steel vessel. So the next step we're going to do, it's going to ripen. It's going to be beautiful. One of my favorite smells in the whole world is at the end of the ripening period, you take the lid off and there's just this cool, I don't even know how to explain it to you. So you're going to have to make your own to find out. So next thing you want to do is add the rennet. Now the rennet is what causes the curds in the whey to start separating. It's called a coagulant. You're going to take a small little ramekin like this, and you're going to put about 1/4 cup of unchlorinated water in it. The reason it's super important to use the unchlorinated water is because chlorine can kill the good bacteria that we're trying to develop for the good flavor in our cheese. And then for a 1 gallon batch, we're going to use 1/4 teaspoon of rennet. Now there's liquid and tablets. I like the liquid better because I don't have to worry about dissolving it. And then there's vegetable and animal. And in my experience, they both work equally well. I use the vegetable because I have vegetarian friends in my life. Now, if you're using pasteurized or pasteurized homogenized milk, what you want to do for a gallon batch, you're going to 1/4 teaspoon and you're going to beat it. So it's going to bead on the top a little bit. And then you're going to put it in your water. Now I have a 2 gallon batch, so I'm going to do that one more time. Now I'm using raw milk, so when I use raw milk, I use just a tiny bit less. You don't have to use the whole amount. So instead of a beaded measurement spoon, I use a flat measurement spoon when I'm using raw milk. Some people say to use half. I don't like to do that. It doesn't set up as well. So I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to stir it up just a little bit. Now the reason that you put it in the water is, again, for equal distribution. You know, 1/4 teaspoon isn't much. And if I just put that right in there, I'm going to be stirring for a while to ensure that I get it through all of the milk. Now, one thing that we need to do if we're using pasteurized milk, and that is to add calcium chloride to it. You don't need to do this if you're using raw milk. And you add the same amount of calcium chloride as you add rennet. And the calcium chloride repairs some of the damage done to the milk in the pasteurization process and gets you a better curd. So whether or not your recipe calls for it, if you're using pasteurized or pasteurized homogenized milk, please use your calcium chloride. You're going to put it in before the rennet because the rennet starts hitting like that. Once it hits, it starts working straight away. So put the calcium chloride in first, and you're going to add it exactly the same way I'm going to add the rennet. But before I add the rennet, I'm going to put some habaneros in here. Now, Jack is wonderful because you can spice it up. And to learn all the details about adding flavors to your cheese, I do have a video on my channel called Cheesemaking, Spice It Up. So there's about 7 habaneros here. This is a 2 gallon batch again. For a 1 gallon batch, you're going to only want to use 3 or 4. And you just put it in your milk. Now remember, when you're dealing with hot peppers, either wear gloves or don't touch them, or make sure that you don't touch your eyes before you wash your hands. And again, you just stir them in here. Now, if you're going to add something to your milk, when you're pouring out the whey, make sure that you don't lose it in the whey because you don't want to lose your flavors. And I'll show you that when we get to that point. All right, so adding the rennet. We have a slotted spoon here. Here's another reason we use a slotted spoon in cheese making. I'm going to take my rennet and just pour it around like that. Now you're going to do your calcium chloride exactly the same way. And again, this is to help with the even distribution of the ingredient that you're putting in your milk. And then you're going to stir it round and round, up and down, not round and round this way, but around and around the pot, from top to bottom. So you take it from the top and you take it down to the bottom. That way we get it all the way through the milk, and so we get a nice, beautiful curd at the end of it. All right. So now we're going to put the lid on it. We're going to maintain the temperature at 86. Still same thing. Milk holds its temperature very, very well. We're in the stainless steel pot with the reinforced bottom and the lid on it. We're going to let it sit for half an hour. Let me put this out of here, out of the way. Then after half an hour, you're going to take your pot and you're going to check for what's called a clean break. Now, a clean break is where the whey and curds break cleanly from each other. And there's several ways you can check for that. You can either pull the curd away from the side of the pot and look to see if whey starts filling up in the side. You can just go in there and pull up a big chunk of it and look, is the whey filling in the hole? But I like to just do a little hole in the middle and then look to see when I release it, is there any whey in that little hole that I just made? And can you see the whey falling off the end of my cutter? And the whey has to be clear. If it's not clear, it's not ready, because that's not a clean break. So this is what I call a curd cutter. A lot of you are gonna go, Kim, that's an icing knife. You're right. You don't have to buy a lot of special ingredients in cheese making or equipment. You probably have it at home. Now for Jack, and this varies from cheese to cheese, we're gonna cut it in 3/4 inches. And we're gonna do vertical and horizontal checkerboards. And you know, there's things called cheese harps that you can get to make the cuts, but you'd have to have one that's a 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch and 3/4 inch and 3/8 inch, etc., etc. Before you know it, you're gonna blow your budget on cheese harps. I just use this icing knife or a chef's knife. And again, like I said, we're doing a checkerboard, horizontal and vertical. 3/4 inch. Now you're gonna find the cut is gonna be bigger in cheeses that are moister. So like in your cheddar, which is a drier cheese, and your Parmesan, it's anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch cuts. Monterey Jack is a semi-firm cheese. It's 3/4 of cut. Because the cut helps the whey start to get released. So now what we're gonna do when we cut this way is we start up high and go in sideways. And down, and in, and down. So we're taking this all the way into the side, and we're going deeper each time. Now I like to do it several ways just because these are the harder cuts to get. And you'll find, because I will show you, when I start stirring these, there will be some that I missed, guaranteed. So you're just gonna let this sit for 5 minutes. Now this is an important step. Don't skip this step, especially if you're using pasteurized or pasteurized homogenized milk. This allows the curds to firm up a little bit. If you're using a lesser quality milk, what might happen if you started stirring right now is they might just kind of start to disintegrate a little bit. By doing this, that helps for that to not happen. Now I'm using raw milk, so I'm very confident that's not going to happen. That doesn't mean skip the step, but for time, I want to go ahead and show you what we're going to do next. So the next step is going to be to heat your milk up to your curds up to 102 degrees. Now the reason that we're doing this is to expel more whey from your curds, and this is called cooking your curds. And this is a step done in different ways for different cheeses. Now all cheeses are done basically with the same steps, but the steps are varied. With cheddar, you heat it up to 104. With Parmesan, you heat it up to 135. With other cheeses, you pour the whey out and use hot water to cook your curds. That's called a washed curd cheese. With our Monterey Jack, we're going to slowly heat the curd up to 102, probably over about a 20-25 minute period. And the reason that we do it slowly is because this is intended to expel the whey, which is something that's going to be a slower process. As you stir the curds, which you're going to do for the entire 20 minutes till it gets to 102 degrees, you're going to notice your curds getting rounder and they're getting smaller. So that almost took 5 minutes to explain, didn't it? Okay, so this is what a beautiful cheese curd looks like. Just like this. Let me see if I can get it closer. I gotta clean this up anyway. So there we go. There's some beautiful curds, and there's a beautiful curd on my counter. We're gonna look to see if we have any that are particularly large. If they are, we're just gonna take our spoon and gently cut through them. So you're gonna go down to the bottom, lift them up to the top. You see anything that's larger than 3/4 inch, just take your spoon and gently cut through them. And you're going to do this for 20 to 25 minutes with your heat on medium-low. Now, if you notice that it starts to warm up a little bit too fast, so get yourself a thermometer with a clip on it like this and put it on the side of your pot. If you see it starts to heat up too fast, either turn your heat down, turn your heat off for a few minutes, and just keep doing what you're doing, because that whey has reached a certain temperature where it's going to keep cooking the curds for you. And if you turn it off for 2, 3, 4 minutes and then turn it back on low, just as long as you take at least 20 to 25 minutes to do this step. Now remember how I told you that milk retains this temperature really, really well? This ripened for 45 minutes, had the rennet sitting in it for 30, and the temperature right now is 86 degrees. Now, if you remember back to the very beginning, that's the temperature we heated the cheese up to, and my kitchen right now is 68. So, milk does keep its temperature very well. And you're just gonna gently stir, mostly from the bottom up, and you're gonna watch for those big curds. Now, as they start reducing down, and there aren't very many of them, if you find one and it's just not getting cut, just gently pinch. I mean, really gently. Really gently. Be gentle. Be nice to these guys. They didn't do anything to you. And then you're going to stir. And I'm already seeing that they're getting a little smaller and they're getting a little rounder. And we've only been stirring for a couple minutes. Now, if you're using an electric stove, make sure you take this completely off the heat when you're done. If you're using a gas stove, you just turn your burner off and leave it there. So 20, 25 minutes to 102 degrees. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna set it aside once it hits 102, and you're gonna let it sit for 30 minutes. So let's do this. Let's put this back here out of our way. After the 30 minutes is up, you're going to drain a little bit of the whey off of it until you can see the curd, the top of the curds. And I save that whey, and there's a lot of uses for the whey. And so, and again, yes, Kim has a video on what to do with whey, so check that one out as well. And then what you're going to do after you pour a little bit of the whey off is you're going to stir it for a few more minutes. Now you remember those great, and this is after it sat for 30 minutes. Now remember those great big curds we had before? Look how small they are now. All right, that's exactly what you want to see. And that happened, why? Because the whey is coming out of the curd. Now we're doing this just for a few minutes, just one last little spin around the block to firm them up. Now when you poured your whey out, if you had put peppers or anything else in here that you don't want to lose, pour it into your strainer so that it will catch those things, and just put them right back in your milk. All right, oh, those look amazing. So our next step is to pour our curds into our strainer. So I have a strainer here on top of another pot because I want to capture the whey. And I've lined it with a 90 grade cheesecloth. Now 90 grade is what you need for cheese making. 45 is not woven tight enough. Butter muslin is too tight. Now there's a few cheeses you're going to use butter muslin for, but for the most part it's going to be 90 grade. And just take this and pour it on in there. And we are going to let this sit and drain for a few minutes. Now, like I said, I made a 2-gallon batch, and it's going to be your call. When you start making cheese, make 1-gallon batches. That's the best to learn on. And if you're like me and you're messy, do this in the sink. All right, so we're just going to let these drain. Look at those beautiful curds. It almost looks like a little popcorn, doesn't it? Now, Monterey Jack differs in from a lot of different cheeses, you don't put it in a brine. You're going to salt it straight away, like you do cheddars and so forth. So let me grab some salt and I'll be right back. So we're going to do a tablespoon per gallon, and we're going to use kosher salt or salt that does not contain iodine. Now, we don't want to use iodine for the same reason we do not use chlorine. It will kill the good bacteria you're trying to have grow to make the good flavors in your cheese. Now, like I told you, I did a 2-gallon batch, so I'm going to use 2 tablespoons. But when you do a 1-gallon batch, you're just going to use 1 tablespoon. And you're going to sprinkle the salt all the way around the top. Like that. There we go. And you're going to do what's called mill it in. M-I-L-L, mill. And you're just going to get your hand in there and get that salt all the way through the cheese. Now, salt is a very important ingredient in cheese making. There's 2 reasons we use salt in cheese making. You know what they are? One is flavor, obviously. I know everybody got that one right. The other one is to preserve the cheese because it's going to go through an aging process. And salt has always been used as a preservative. Okay, so we got down in there, we got all our curds salted. Now it's time to mold our cheese. Now there's 2 different ways you could do this. I personally like the way that involves the least amount of cleanup. So you can either take another cheesecloth and line your cheese mold with the cheesecloth, or you can just lift this up and put it in there. Now, when you're starting out cheese making, you don't have to get all these molds. Now, this one I got online at that big retail place, and it was 25 bucks for this beautiful mold. It'll hold 2 gallons worth of curds. But you can use a springform pan. You can all kinds of things. And I know, yeah, I do have a video on cheese making equipment. It gives you some ideas, stuff to use when you start out. So I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to grab all the corners of the cheesecloth. I'm going to pull it up, and you see the whey coming out of the bottom there? I'm going to give it a good little squeeze. Not too much, because I want it to be a little bit slower process. And then I'm just going to set it down into my mold. That made a good amount of curds. As you can see, it's kind of coming over the top there. Now, what do I do if that happens? I'm going to take my cheesecloth like this, and I'm going to gently press it down with the back of my hand. Be careful because there's holes in the side. Now, the reason there's holes in your mold is to drain the whey. And then I'm going to take my top, or what's called a follower, to press it down just a little bit more. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cheesecloth and I'm going to kind of pull it up around the side. Now, this is something you don't have to do, but if you don't want a bunch of lines in your cheese, you might want to do it. And then I just fold it over. Now, you can fold all of it over if you like, or just a little bit of it, just enough that it's covered. And then I take my follower and I put it on the top here. Now, a follower is very important, and it's called a follower because after you put it in the press and you get some weight on it, it's going to follow the cheese down as the whey gets expelled from it. And what we will do is we will get some more stuff out of our whey, huh? So we're going to get our cheese press. Now, there's all kinds of different cheese presses. This one, a friend of mine, her husband's a friend of mine, made it for me. It's beautiful. I love it. And it's very simple. This is the top. There's a bottom. And we got the holes in it. And I can just, if it calls for 10 pounds of weight, I can just put 10 pounds of weight on it. and it'll just follow it down like that. Nothing I have to cinch down, nothing complicated to figure out, really super easy. Just the way I like it. Now you're gonna put this right there. Now I have a cookie sheet with a cooling rack in it so that the whey has somewhere to go. It doesn't make a great big mess. Then we're gonna put 10 pounds of weight on it. 5, 10, and let it sit for about an hour. Now after that hour is over, we're gonna flip it. And I made one yesterday. I'll show you how you flip it. So you take it right here, and you're just gonna take the lid off. Use the cheesecloth to pull it out. Now this one has habanero in it. You're gonna undress it. You might wanna do it in private. Flip it over. Redress it. Put it back in the mold. Cover it back up. Put your follower back on there. And then put it back in the press. Now always make sure that your follower is above the top of the mold, because if it gets below the top, it's not doing you any good. So you're gonna have to put a can or something like that in there so there's something for the weight to press on. Now, one thing I like to do after that second flip, because I like a pretty cheese, I'm gonna take this out about an hour later, and I'm gonna put it in there without any cheesecloth. Right like that. I'm gonna take that on there, and I'm gonna put it back in the press for 10 hours or overnight. And you're like, Kim, how are you gonna get that out of there? Well, I'll show ya. Now, of course, I know it's gonna come out easy because I just had it out, but all you have to do is kind of just tap on the outside of the mold and it will come out. And there you go. There is a beautiful habanero jack cheese. You don't put the habaneros in there, it's just jack. You don't have to brine it, and you don't surface dry this one either. You straight age it, whether you're gonna natural rind, whether you're gonna bandage it, whether you're gonna wax it or vacuum seal, which is what I like to do. And again, there's a video on my channel about aging, and that's it. Now, Monterey Jack seems like a very simple cheese to make, but it is one that people have a lot of problems with. And just know that if you want a semi-firm, semi-moist Monterey Jack cheese, this is the recipe you need to follow. And if you follow it and it still seems a little dry to you, either only heat the curds up to 100 degrees, don't press it quite as long, anything to do to not quite get all the whey out. Now you want to get a good amount of the whey out or else you're going to have a bitter cheese. But do a little step that will not have so much of the whey come out. Like I said, just maybe press it with 7 pounds instead of 10. Or press it with 10 pounds for 11 hours instead of 12. All right, everybody, that's how to make jack cheese. I look forward to seeing all your jack cheese wheels. You can find the recipe at the webpage, www.scratchmadelife.com, under the recipes tab. If you have questions, you can contact me there or on the Facebook page, Scratch Made Life. Everybody have a great day and happy cheese making. Bye now.